When I was a young boy playing games on the NES, I dreamed of the day when 2D games would grow from the blocky, pixelated graphics of the time to controllable cartoons that resembled the detailed cartoons found in the instruction booklets. Perhaps more than any game that has come before, Cuphead is the realization of this dream, a fully controllable wonderland that plays like a controllable version of an early 20th century animated film short. It's also a throwback to those 8-bit days of Nintendo hard games that extended their limited content mainly by being controller-throwingly difficult. Let's start with the look, which is the first thing that will attract anyone's potential interest in Cuphead. An in-game conceit puts a 1930, MCMXXX, trademark on the entire production, and the animation is an almost perfect throwback to that era's style of ultra-expressive, bouncy animated shorts. Characters, objects, and even pieces of background scenery wind up, squash, stretch, slide, and bounce with infectious energy. Cuphead's cast is almost as ridiculous as it is diverse. Monstrous flowers, spear-wielding seeds, oversized bouncing candies, somersaulting frogs, and a woman who transforms into various zodiac creatures are just some of the game's many wild characters. They already look detailed and lively in static screenshots, but that's only the beginning. Each character vibrates with a manic, animated energy driven by the game's peppy, big band jazz soundtrack. Idle characters don't just flip through a couple of frames of placeholder animation, but, rather, they twist and coil with a hidden menace of potential energy waiting to be let out. Every screen is a riot of color and motion that I can say without hyperbole is like nothing I've ever seen in a game before. The art even gets the little details of its throwback animation homage right, from slightly bleeding colors and film grain to wavy outlines that wiggle with imperfection from frame to frame. Even the map screen uses the classic animation feature of foreground elements drawn with an entirely different palette than the more muted, painterly backgrounds. The hand-animated scenes are so compelling and full of life, in fact, that the game's few purely digital art elements stand out like sore thumbs. These usually come in the form of enemy projectiles, which are often drawn with the two perfect vector lines and shapes more commonly seen in flash animations. These projectiles often move in overly smooth curves or straight lines, too, making them stand out further from the more sinuous, free-form animation found in the rest of the scene. In most games, this kind of overly precise, computer-generated art and animation style would barely be noticeable, much less worth noting. In the otherwise beautiful rendering of Cuphead, though, these elements stand out just enough to detract from any scene they're in. And while the thick outlines and solid colors of Cuphead's art generally make it easy to quickly read and interpret a scene, the crowded frames sometimes get in their own way. In a few levels, foreground elements obstruct large parts of the bottoms and sides of the screen. It's a cool-looking effect that brings to mind classic multiplane film animation, but it's not worth it when a blocked view of Cuphead or an enemy results in an untimely death. Hard as a rock measured in a certain way, Cuphead is pretty short. The game's 18 required boss fights and 6 optional run-and-gun platforming stages can all be beaten in about 2 or 3 minutes each, even if you're not trying to set a new speedrun record. But that's assuming a perfect run without any deaths. Like so many classics of the 8-bit era before it, Cuphead extends its length via a brutal difficulty that will require hundreds of cumulative deaths for all but the preternaturally gifted. It's not that the bosses are unfair exactly. On the contrary, each one seems designed in the truest 8-bit throwback style, with repetitive patterns that are relatively easy to suss out as you dodge and shoot back with rapid-fire bullets. Side note: this game really needs an auto-fire option for players who don't want to hold down the X button for hours on end. Each boss telegraphs most of its dashes and attacks in order to give you a chance to find safety, with just enough randomness thrown in to prevent repeated attempts from feeling utterly rote. In great news, no two bosses play out even close to the same way in terms of movements or attacks, or visual design, for that matter. But a combination of the speed, size, and sheer ferocity of the enemy and projectile movements makes each fight feel unforgiving. Even a slight mistake in positioning or an overly twitchy push of the jump button will cost you one of only 3 pieces of health you're given. There's no limit on lives, but there are also no checkpoints, meaning one false move in the last phase of a fight can erase the last 2 or 3 minutes. So,